All right, just panning to show my other person. All right, and we will begin. Have you ever walked down the sidewalk and wondered why it was sloped the way it was, or wondered what the yellow bump mat is at the end of the sidewalk at an intersection? It is my goal today to teach you about the reasons why sidewalks are built the way they are by going over a few details, like what is ADA compliance, what standards does ADA set for sidewalks, and where do I find these standards? So let's start off with what ADA compliance is. ADA compliance stands for American with Disabilities Act compliance. This was a bill that was signed in by federal legislators in 2010 and turned into law. In 2012, it was enacted that all new construction must comply with ADA compliance standards. Now, ADA compliance standards only sets a minimum standard. It does not set a maximum. So you can exceed the expectations of ADA law, but you cannot go below them. So what are the standards if there are no maximum standards? The minimum standards depends on what area of the sidewalk you are referring to. Let's cover some of the basics. The cross slope of a sidewalk, running from one edge to the other, going across, is set for ADA compliance at 2.6%. So that means the slope or the angle at which the sidewalk sits cannot go over 2.6%. Now, if you come down to a state level, like Florida, they set their standard at 2%. I'm sorry, they set their standard at 2.3%. And they do that to leave themselves a little bit of leeway between the federal standard. So in case someone gets hurt on their sidewalk, they can say, well, we met this percentage and the federal percentage is this. So we're safe and we have a buffer zone. Now, if you come into a city standard, that would be at 2% for most cities or municipalities. Now, they do that as well for another buffer for going up the chain. If somebody were to get hurt, they would do the same thing to protect themselves. The next ADA compliance standard would be for a running slope that we're going to talk about. That would be the slope of the sidewalk that you're walking down, whether it's going to be steep, incline, or decline. That's going to be considered your running slope. Now, this slope cannot exceed 5% by ADA standards. That can be found on the ADA website, and it'll go under the sidewalk construction area. Now, with state standards and city standards for a running slope, they pretty much stay the same at 5% because this is a harder slope to meet. Based on hills and things like that, it makes it a little bit harder to get that under the 5%. Another standard that we'll talk about are the mats that's at the end of a sidewalk ramp before going into an intersection. These are called truncated domes. And what those do is help visually impaired individuals know that they're about to cross into an intersection, so they may not have that interaction with a car that is not wanted. Now, how do you know which standards that you need to follow? Depending on what area you're doing construction, that is the area of standards that you need to follow. So with the federal standards, you're going to, if you're on federal land or you're under federal jurisdiction, you will follow the ADA standards to a T. All right, and those can be found, like I said earlier, on the ADA website. Now, if you were to come down to state level, you would then follow that state's engineering standards plan. And you can find those on whichever state agency that you're working in. In Florida, you would look up the Florida Department of Transportation engineering standards plan. If you go down to local municipalities such as Tampa, Hillsborough County, or the city of Lakeland, you would go to their individual cities' websites or counties' websites and look for their engineering standards manual. Now, like I said earlier, each one can differ. They can get more strict with the requirements, but they cannot go below the standards of ADA. All right. So ADA compliance is a real important part of sidewalk construction because it helps the disabled function the same way as those who have no disabilities. It helps protect local, state, and federal governments from liability. And so there is reason for the way that sidewalks are created the way they are. Whether they have weird turns, ramps, or even awkward mats, it was all done with a purpose to provide equal treatment to everyone. So I hope we were able to teach you a little bit about why sidewalks are made the way they are and what ADA compliance is. Thank you.
You never said your in-text citations.
Whatever.
I think still recording.
Did you stop recording?
Hey, Stacy.